Everyone, my name is Maura Devine. I am the National Grassroots Manager for the Voices for Healthy Kids team here at the American Heart Association. I'm responsible for grassroots strategy and supporting our campaigns. And I'm here with my amazing colleague, Danielle Patterson. Danielle is a National Senior Advocacy Consultant with our team, and she has extensive experience in government relations, so you'll really enjoy her part of the presentation. Today, we're going to talk specifically about decision maker advocacy. Next slide, please. So here at Voices for Healthy Kids, we use the Power Prism Advocacy Framework. This was created by My Power People. And the framework is a step-by-step plan that helps you recognize and act on opportunities to build momentum in a campaign for change. As I mentioned, we're going to focus today on decision maker advocacy, which is one of the tools we use in the framework. And in future sessions or in other sessions that you've attended, you'll hear the other tools that we use in the Power Prism. And then at the end of the session, there'll be time for questions. You can drop them in the chat. We'll also just give you a few minutes at the end if anyone wants to come live and ask us directly. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder about the resource, the Power Prism, there's a website dedicated to the Power Prism, which you can see here, and you can learn more about this advocacy framework. Next slide, please. So the first step of building power for your advocacy campaign is answering 3 key questions. Everything you do in your campaign should be informed and guided by your answers. And you'll hear these questions repeated as you attend our other Power Prism trainings, and they're really important as you get started. Next slide, please. It is tempting to want to jump right into the methods and strategies, but winning policy campaigns really are those that are guided by these 3 questions. The first is, what do you want? What is the specific policy change that you're seeking to address your specific issue? Why do you want it? What data do you have that makes a case for that policy change? And the third is, who has the power to give it to you? Which specific decision makers in state or local government have the power to make that change? The answers to these questions can change throughout a campaign, so it's helpful to get into the habit of revisiting them regularly. Once you have those answers, it's time to come up with strategies for each of the power tools that will influence decision makers. So again, today we'll talk specifically about decision maker advocacy. Next slide. So here you can see an example of the Power Prism. This just shows you all the other tools that we have in our toolbox. Influencing decision makers is all about making it easier for them to give you what you want. So these 6 power tools of advocacy help apply pressure on decision makers to reach our policy goals. And the way we choose to use each of these 6 power tools can either advance health equity and racial justice or uphold the status quo and structural racism. Next slide. While decision maker advocacy relies on the other power tools, it's also critical to think about it before you undertake some of the other work. Learning more about the key decision makers for your campaign will help you ensure you're gearing your campaign work toward these specific lawmakers. Next slide. Some decision makers have the ability to support and accelerate bills, or they can stop them altogether. These are typically lawmakers that chair a committee that your bill may be assigned, or who hold a legislative leadership position, and they have a powerful role in your campaign. Next slide. And that's where power mapping comes in. And power mapping is really just a fancy term for researching, matchmaking, planning, executing, and then planning again. Next slide. And this is where we talk about pathways of influence. So you'll see on the screen here the step-by-step recipe for success. And the pathways of influence is really about knowing which individual lawmakers specifically have the power to give you what you want. This is critical. Once you figure that out, it's time to learn as much as you can about the person that you're working with. And you can do that through public sources and conversations with people who might know them personally or professionally. And we'll dive in a little bit deeper on that a little bit later in the presentation. Your research will uncover valuable pathways of influence to that lawmaker, and it dramatically improves your ability to appeal to them based on their own motivated self-interest or possible mutual contacts or relationships. Sometimes you might have heard this called target research. So let's say in doing your research, you discover that a lawmaker has children that attend a particular elementary school and their spouse is a pediatrician, or there's a Boys and Girls Club in their district, and maybe they're on the board of the local conference of the NAACP. All of that information, all those details can become pathways of influence where you can start looking for connections with people you know or other people know and bring them all together. And then you want to follow through on those. And Andrea is going to drop in the chat a link to our Pathways of Influence worksheet that'll help you with this work. Next slide. So there's really a long but important process in terms of working with decision makers. So policy advocacy, as you probably know, is really messy or can be. It has many steps and there's key decision makers all along the way. And in some cases, it can take years for advocates to work through an issue, and they often need to return to the starting point to try again. So anticipating who the key decision makers are will be really important. You want to do this early on and establish those pathways of influence to each of those key decision makers along the way. So starting here in the steps, your bill sponsor is your key legislative champion. They're not one of your target decision makers because they've already decided to support you. Yes, it's possible that you got lucky and the House Speaker has agreed to sponsor your bill, but even the House Speaker has to go through a process. Choosing a strong bill sponsor and a strong, diverse, and bipartisan list of co-sponsors really sets a strong foundation for the campaign. If you've done some homework early on to figure out which committee will first hear your bill, who chairs that committee, and who will be in leadership of the House of Representatives or the Senate or City Council, you should make every effort to select a bill sponsor who's really liked and respected by those other leaders. If your bill sponsor doesn't get along well with the leaders of your committee or jurisdiction or legislative leadership, you're going to have to expect that each step of the process is going to be steep. Moving on to committees of jurisdiction. So thinking about the chairs of the committees that are going to hear your bill, you want to think about what subcommittees exist and who are the key gatekeepers. And there might be more than one. Your bill sponsor and lobbyist may be able to help you steer your bill to a favorable committee if policy content could fall under different categories. Danny's going to talk a little bit more specifically about the committee work later on. And it's also not uncommon for a bill to be assigned to more than one committee, reported out favorably, and then assigned to another committee for review. So you'll have to track this along the way. In state legislature, some committees are actually joint committees with leadership and members from both the House and the Senate. And that's helpful because it can save time from having to go through the whole committee process twice, which is the case with committees that are not joint committees, and you have to get your bill through both the House and the Senate. Moving on to legislative leadership, every legislative body has official leadership. This includes the House Speaker, the Senate President, maybe the City Council President, a majority leader, a minority leader, and so on. These are usually listed on the website. Now that we're going to have a new legislative sessions coming up this next year, a lot of that's currently being updated or already has been. That's a great place to look. It's readily available to the public. And within an advocacy campaign, it's really important to know this information. These leaders are not dictators who call every shot in the building, but they do have a lot of power. So it's important to understand who they are. And each of these official and formal legislative leaders are often surrounded by an inner circle of informal leaders. And these are the folks they really listen to and get support from. Those could be old friends, political allies, or even book club buddies, and you may never know why it is that they have such a special relationship, but you will see ripple effects of those friendships and alliances, and you want to observe their social contexts. These informal gatekeepers can kill or move bills forward without anyone even knowing that they have that kind of influence. So it's really wise to figure out which member of the legislative body has this kind of power. And it often doesn't come with a big title. So as you're spending time in these, at the Capitol, for example, just ask around. Seasoned lobbyists, longtime legislative staffers, and even your bill sponsor can shed light on who those real friends are. Let's talk a little bit more then about the legislative body. So state legislators, except Nebraska, are bicameral, and both chambers need to approve a bill before it moves to the governor, and it may require an entirely new committee process. At the municipal and local level, there's only one chamber to approve. So your bill sponsor and approving committee chairs are really critical shepherds here. And just remember, your job is not to convince every member of the legislative body to support your position. You don't even have to directly convince a majority of that body to support your decision, but you do need to indirectly influence them to support your position by working through the other lawmakers who you've cultivated relationships with along the way. Moving on to executive branch leadership, which is really important, one of the last steps in the process. So remember, a governor or a mayor has veto power. So you might have done all this work and then it gets up to that highest level and they have the power to just kill the bill completely or make sure that it gets signed into law. So they look to their designees for guidance. Executive branch staff leaders with oversight for your issue can really be important gatekeepers. These can be cabinet members, department heads, and others. If you're pursuing legislation that would equitably increase sugary sugary drink excise tax for the purpose of lowering consumption of sugary drinks, sugary drinks and raising revenue that could be invested in needs prioritized by those communities. It's really reasonable to believe that the governor might reach out to relevant staff for input. So let's say that tax proposal would direct new revenues to provide Medicaid to children and families through school-based health centers. The governor might ask key staff for their opinions on the value of the proposed policy, implementation concerns to those including staff, those specifically that lead the departments of revenue and taxation. They might talk to people working on Medicaid and education. All of these people would be impacted by the proposed measure. So getting a green light from those executive branch leaders will help get a green light from the governor or mayor. So to sum this all up, really, knowledge is power every step along the way. A savvy campaigner will invest time into researching promising pathways of influence to these legislative leaders and learning about their priority policy issues and those most critical to their district, the history of systemic oppression and racism in their district, to help make the equity connection. Any political ambitions that they have could tie support to the issue, and their relationships with your opposition are really, really important pieces of information to gather. Researching those pathways of influence takes a bit of time up front, but will save you lots of time by helping you understand which tactics, strategies, messages, and messengers are most likely to succeed with the decision maker. Next slide. So Andrea is going to drop the key decision maker worksheet into the chat after this call. I encourage you to spend some time working through that. Who are the key decision makers you can expect to encounter along the campaign journey? Next slide. And like I said earlier, you really do want to find out more about your key decision makers. How many times have we all heard the expression, do your homework? It couldn't be more appropriate than when describing what we need to do before we reach out to key decision makers who have the power to give us what we want in the legislative or regulatory arena. Walking into a key lawmaker's office without having done homework on who they are and what they care about is a lost opportunity to make a meaningful connection. You don't need to spend hours, just a few minutes online can help you find important details. Next slide. So here's some ways that you can find out more about key decision makers. You could go online and look at legislative biographies and campaign bios as well. Find a way to connect through these details is a really positive way to go about it. You may know someone who went to the same college, or perhaps you both have spouses in the healthcare profession. Another option is looking at the districts and cities or towns that they serve. This is a very critical aspect of advocacy because lawmakers want to hear from their own constituents on issues. In addition, knowing what issues are most pressing for the communities they serve will help you understand how to connect your campaign to their district. Mobilizing grassroots advocates or key contacts who live and vote in a lawmaker's district is important. When setting up in-person meetings with lawmakers, try to plan group meetings with at least one constituent. And then also take some time to learn about the history of systemic racism and health inequities in the district. Because our policy goals are or should be centered in health equity, it'll be important to be able to speak with key decision makers about the history of systemic racism and health inequity within their district to bring it to life. By doing some advanced homework on this, advocates can localize historical context in ways that will make it hard to ignore. It's one thing to understand the history of redlining in a global sense, but it's another thing to read the language used within the city or town that the decision maker now calls home. We can help decision makers see those long tentacles of systemic oppression in their own community with a little advanced homework. Next slide. And then you also want to think about appealing to a decision maker's self-interest. Self-interest sounds bad, but it doesn't have to be. Every single elected official is just like every other person on the planet, and they're governed by some elements of self-interest. Self-interest can be trying to make a mark on policy that makes the world a better place, whether it's education or access to healthcare. Knowing what a lawmaker's self-interest is and then messaging around that issue allows us to approach them a little bit more effectively with our campaign. This can work for issues that we work on as well. If a lawmaker cares about early childhood education, for example, or health, or food insecurity, or equity and social justice, or even if they're a parent or a grandparent or in any way connected to children growing up healthy, we can draw these aspects of their work and lives into the conversations that we have with them to make our issue personally relevant to them. Next slide. So I think Andrea already drops it in, but using that Pathways of Influence worksheet and then another tool that we have called Tips for Trainers, this will just allow you to walk through the research steps that I outlined and the sources, and then use some of the tools that I noted like Google search, city and state legislative websites, campaign websites, press releases, and social media accounts. Danny's now going to talk more specifically about the legislative process and the steps to follow. Danny?
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Mara, for covering the beginning and talking about the power prism and why the power prism is so important as you plan good public health policy campaign. Next slide, Andrea. Okay, so let's talk about this legislative process. And I know a number of you remember the Schoolhouse Rock learning series. They had one called I'm Just a Bill. I love that one. That was like one of my favorite Schoolhouse Rock learning series. If you remember that, just give me a thumbs up or a heart. And it really is, you know, I'm just a bill and I'm only a bill and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. So your bill sponsor will introduce your legislation, right? And that person will introduce it in committee. The bill will be assigned to a legislative committee and a first hearing date will be scheduled. Now, let me add a caveat. It may or may not get a hearing. I think oftentimes we assume all states hear every bill. Some states hear every bill that is authored and some states do not. For instance, in Indiana, we do not hear, I would say, 2/3 of the bills, if not more. So when it is scheduled for a hearing, that's great. That's a good thing because your bill author has done their due diligence in getting a hearing. Your bill sponsor and their staff will track the movement of the bill. And you know what? That's very critical because every step along the way, they also need you as advocates pushing that bill along. And if you have a great bill sponsor, they will do so much of the work for you because you know at the end of the day, they want to win. And this looks good for them if they're able to get their bill out of hearing. Um, Regardless if it's a bill that we support or not, lawmakers want their legislation to pass. And hopefully, they're going to do the due diligence to make that happen. If the bill comes out of committee, it will move to the next step, which may be for a floor vote, or it could move to another committee. So, say for instance, if you're working on a SNAP incentives issue, You may have to go to the health committee based on the SNAP policy itself. But when it comes to an appropriation, the bill may get recommitted to the appropriations committee to add in the dollar amount. So if you're seeking a $5 million appropriation, you may get the policy passed in health, but you will have to go to appropriations to get them to add the $5 million into the budget. So again, you have to know the process your bill will go through up into the governor's desk. And again, if you have a great bill sponsor, they will tell you everything. And I have seen some lawmakers that were not as good and were not as diligent in getting bills passed. But again, your job is to advocate every step of the way. And you have to do that process again when you go over to the next chamber. And let's go back. Let's remember, what do you want? So who could give it to you? And then why do you want it? And who has the power to give it to you? Those three key questions you need to keep asking yourself. So in this case, your bill sponsor is not the person that could give you what you want. It really is the chair of the committee. Because if your bill does not come out of committee, it's not going to go anywhere. So just keep that in mind along the way. Next slide, Andrea. Okay, so we're going to talk about the steps for advancing your legislation. Okay, next slide. Okay, so look at the committee roster. So again, who has the power to give you what you want? In this case, in this scenario, again, it really is the chair and the vice chair of the committee, right? Those are the people that have the power in that committee to give your bill a hearing and to keep it moving. So it's vitally important that you create relationships with them. And the way you do that is to look at the members of the committee. So again, who are your House and Senate committee members, right? You may not have a relationship with the chair and the vice chair, but you may have relationships with 4 or 5 of the members on the committee. And those members can actually advocate for you with the chair and the vice chair. So they can help the bill sponsor by asking the chair and the vice chair, are we going to schedule this legislation for a hearing? I'm in support of it. Or, there are 6 of us on the committee, it may be 9 people. We like this bill. We definitely want to give it a hearing. The committee members are vitally important at this point. So that's why you have to really do your due diligence. You need to do your homework. As it says here in the third bio, research their bios. You need to meet with their staff. You want to do a contact sheet, like a checkoff sheet of each of the members, and meet with them in advance of your bill getting a hearing and checking off the vote count. And you want to check off their support. And you also want to put on your sheet, like, what are their concerns with the bill? Even if they're in support, sometimes they do have concerns. They may be in support of SNAP incentives, but they may not like the $5 million appropriation. So these are the kind of notes that you need to keep. And then before your hearing, you want to look at where you are with your vote count. Does it make sense to go into a hearing when you only have 2 votes? It's up to you. There's value in doing that because even if you go into a hearing, you don't have as many votes. The good thing is you may be able to appeal to those that have not made up their minds yet. So that's something the coalition will have to discuss. If you have a lobbyist or if you have a lead advocacy person working on this, you will discuss at that point what our vote count looks like. Here's the information we gathered on all of the members. Do we want to move forward with the hearing, or do we want to kind of postpone it, this issue, until we have gathered more support? So again, that's something that you will work with your committee on and your advocates. Going back to the pathways of influence research, vitally important here as you work the committee roster. Next slide, Andrea. Some things that you definitely want to do is you want to stay in constant coordination with your bill sponsor. One of the things I always recommend is assigning one person to be your bill sponsor's contact. You don't want 100 people from your coalition reaching out to your bill sponsor with changes to legislation or giving him or her information because it gets confusing. But if you funnel that information through one person to your bill sponsor, it keeps lines of communications open and they can share with the bill sponsor the information you collected on the committee, on the chair, and the House members. That's information that they will find value. And then this will give your bill sponsor an opportunity to do some more work within their own caucus and also with the entire members of the House or the Senate. The other thing is they will give you information about your opposition because your opposition is also advocating for what they want or don't like, or they don't want to see the bill pass. So the bill sponsor may say, "Well, have you had a conversation with, you know, um, the Department of Family and Social Services that's going to manage the SNAP incentives program? They don't have enough staff. You didn't build in budgets for this, or they feel like that they have enough on their plates, they just don't have time." That's information that's valuable to you. So that'll the bill sponsor will tell you before we move forward, you may need to speak to your opposition. And that is so key. And that's very helpful. And again, that will show you the type of bill sponsor that you pick. Um, Work with your legislative sponsor, your bill sponsor, ahead of the hearing because you want to tell that person, like, once he introduces the bill in hearing, in committee hearing, here are the people that you're bringing to testify. He's going to want an expert on SNAP. He's going to want someone with lived experience that's using SNAP. And then he's going to want to hear from advocates that are in support of SNAP itself. And when I mean advocates, I mean other organizations. And I would definitely suggest if there are people that you could bring from his district, his or her district is vitally important because it's great when they could look to someone from their district that's also supporting the bill. So try to, make sure that you really work with your bill sponsor to develop a well-rounded presentation on that bill, because the better he look, he could tell the opposition, these are the people we're bringing. He could tell the committee members, we're going to have this presentation, these experts, and that helps to move the bill along. Next slide. Again, mobilize your grassroots and key contacts. One of the things that I used to like to do is when you look at your committee roster, I try to find people in their districts that will reach out to them. If you already know a committee member is supportive, then the goal of your grassroots and key contacts is to thank them. You want to have your grassroots, your volunteers to call and say thank you. Do not continue to press or push that lawmaker to support the issue if they've already committed to it. But you want to thank them. And that's what I always tell people to do. A phone call or email, a well-written email, a personal email, not a form email, is really a good touch at this point. Or even contacting the staff just to say, "Hi, I'm Danielle Patterson. Here's my address. I can't be there for the hearing, but I just want you to know as your constituent, I'm supportive." Always give your address because they want to identify that you are a constituent of theirs. Um, we can also send as groups, we could do an email template, we could do a telephone script for our advocates and key contacts. Some people just don't have time to write or to make the phone call or think about what to say. Well, again, that is your job as the coalition, as the organization, to prepare these materials in advance. And it's always great if you have your partners, allies, and constituents contact committee leadership. I would not have a constituent that does not live in the district reach out to a particular lawmaker unless that person brings, like, if they're the president of the hospital association or they're the president of a major corporation that may be in another district, but they're lending their voice to the campaign. These are the type of people who live outside of the district you want to bring in. But if it's just another voter that lives in another district, that lawmaker is not going to pay really any attention to them. But again, if you're bringing someone in, if you're bringing in an expert, if you're bringing in a CEO, or someone with a name and some stature, that's who they will listen to. But if you're just bringing in another citizen, they're not going to pay attention. So be careful when you're looking at who you're going to have to contact committee leadership, legislative leadership, and the executive branch leadership. Next slide, Andrea. So when we have the bill hearing events, it's great to plan some type of hearing event. So, what do you want to do prior to the hearing? Like, do you want to hold a news conference? Do you want your coalition to get on social media and create this storm that the bill will be heard on this day? We're calling our lawmakers to vote for it. Do you want to have advocates standing right outside the committee room and be available to speak to media, like a media availability? It's great to plan some sort of media or hearing event because, again, you're bringing attention to your issue and to the legislation. So always think about what can we do prior to. I worked on a CPR, a telephone CPR bill here in Indiana, and we found a constituent from Indianapolis that saved her husband by receiving instructions via telephone from the emergency operator, right? So she was able to save her husband's life. So what I did, I asked our communications director to send out a media advisory saying that this lady will be available to answer questions prior to the hearing. She shared her story. She talked about how she is definitely in support of telephone CPR. We also had our bill sponsor available. And then we did the hearing, and reporters followed us into the hearing. And then afterwards, the bill did move out of committee. A couple of reporters asked follow-up questions. So we were on the lead story. We were one of the lead stories that day. And so it was perfect. It was perfect storm for us. And we got a lot of mileage out of it. The other thing you want to do is if you know you're going to have advocates and volunteers to come to the State House for a hearing, ask them to set up their legislative meetings in advance. So you want them to reach out to their House and Senate committee members and say, hey, I'm going to be at the State House for this hearing. I would love to chat with you for 5 minutes. And also send them with materials. You want to do this in advance because, again, you're creating that excitement around this piece of legislation. And we will talk about this more in a few moments. Next slide. So the other thing to do is always think about how can you give your bill sponsor hero opportunities. So if you're working with your communications director, ask them to work with the communications director for that lawmaker. You want to schedule media interviews. You want to put them on social media. Maybe do a quick 5-minute interview that you could play on your social media pages and link to his. Send have 50 advocates send him a thank you card. You want to create these type of hero opportunities because the more you make them feel good, the more work that they will do on the bill. And again, that will show you the type of lawmaker it is that, when they're getting this admiration, it really do help them to think, okay, you know what? I'm going to prioritize. I may have 50 other bills, but I'm going to prioritize this one because my advocates are really out there promoting this bill, promoting this legislation. They're giving me opportunities to talk. So the more you can create hero opportunities for them, the better they will work for you. And also, always make sure to send thank you letters to lawmakers for meetings, any positive actions that they take on a bill. We want to show our appreciation to them for their work. And now I will turn it back over to Mara.
Thanks, Danny. So let's talk a little bit more about special events, which Danny noted a few minutes ago. So there's a variety of special legislative events. Some of you might have participated in them in the past. This can include policy briefings, bill hearings, and lobby days. Next slide. Working very closely with your bill's champions to make sure an event like this comes off is really important, and it does take time. So one thing to be prepared for, and I've experienced this myself, you're going to have to do 90% of the work yourself. You're going to have to be the one with the action plan and the agenda and making sure and being responsible that for the tasks and making sure that they're assigned to the various people they need to be and then completed. And since this is a service to your cause and campaign, with support and leadership of your key allies, think about the proper care and feeding of your leaders and the folks who are with you. You can't take them for granted. You want to give them the opportunity to show up, to look good, to do good, while you have done most of the work behind the scenes. That's totally okay. The whole goal here is to get your legislation passed. So it's actually better than okay. It's a success. Next slide. Your campaign might bring a lot of helpful assets to a state house or city event. So you might be able to bring in issue experts who can testify and talk to legislators. You can provide lunch, or you can even think about having celebrity supporters. This can help your bill sponsors look like heroes, and speakers and celebrities can influence other decision maker attendees. There are many different people who care about children's health and health equity, so think about who might be willing to speak on your behalf that can inspire lawmakers and staff to rearrange their busy schedules to show up. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about testifying at public hearings. This can be intimidating for people for sure. These state and local legislative hearings and even town meetings are an opportunity to speak directly to decision makers about your issue. It's really helpful to do some advanced research to find out who is on the committee, the way that Danny explained earlier, and what district they represent. Ideally, some of the advocates who testify on behalf of your legislation will live in a committee member's district. Remember, legislators and lawmakers generally want to hear specifically from the constituents that they serve. Testimony is often a critical part of these events, and you can help ensure you have compelling testimony on behalf of your bill. First and foremost, it's helpful to know which districts the committee members represent, and as I mentioned, have people there who actually represent that district. In addition, it's important to reinforce that testimony should focus on personal stories and connections to the issue. Danny gave a couple of examples earlier. You will already have represented the facts and figures. In fact, lawmakers get a lot of this data, but it's the connection to the personal experience that will make your issue memorable and relevant. Next slide. Once your events are over, think about some other post-event opportunities. So let's say no reporters show up, and that is pretty common. You can still create buzz after the fact with photos, social media posts, thanking and tagging sponsors, and even sending letters to the editor with photos to the local press. If you can make noise and make sure your champions and allies look good, this yields positive feelings, and it really draws the attention of key decision makers to your champions. You make champions look good, and you become noted as an organization that is good to work with. Key decision makers understand that goodwill multiplies, that hero opportunities exist for them as well, and that the groups involved are wonderful friends to have. Next slide. Danny's going to talk a little bit more specifically about meetings with lawmakers.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mara. You covered some really key points in setting up special events at the State House. The one thing I do want to add, keep in mind that when you set up special events, you may not be the only special event at the State House at that time. So you will be competing with other organizations, other causes, other issues, and you will also be competing for lawmakers' time. So always keep that in mind as you do special events. One thing I stayed away from, I started staying away from lunches because lawmakers eat, and there are a bunch of people providing lunches. I just save money by not doing lunches. And I started doing something in the afternoon between 1 and 4 where I provided snacks like nuts and little snacks that they could get because lawmakers snack all day long. So that's something that I started doing. I was still able to get in front of lawmakers. They came out for the snacks, and that gave me an opportunity to meet with them about my issues. So just a little tidbit. So let's talk about meetings with lawmakers. One of the things that I always tell people when you meet with lawmakers, keep in mind that it's not just the lawmaker you're going to meet with, you're going to meet with their staff. Oftentimes, lawmakers are pulled in so many different directions, they may not have the time to meet directly with you, but you can have a great meeting with key legislative staff. Never take that for granted. It is when you can sit down with the staffer, you may have more time to make the case with them. You can share more information with them. You could build a good relationship with staffers, and in turn, they will share that information with lawmakers. They will talk to lawmakers and give them the update on your meeting. And so always remember the meetings with staffers are just as important as the meetings with lawmakers. The other thing is you always have to make sure when you do have a meeting with lawmakers, know your research, do your homework on your issue. You may not be able to answer all of their questions, but if you can answer the majority, that will be great. And it's perfectly fine if a lawmaker asks you a question and you don't know the answer, just say, that is a very good question. I don't know that information offhand. May I get back to you with that? And always set up a time to get back to them with the information. Can I get back to you within 48 hours? Or it may take us a little bit more time. Can I get a 2 week deadline to get that information to you? And follow up in the email regarding the information that you're going to research for them, and again, repeat when you will have that information to them. And if you cannot meet the deadline, it's perfectly okay to say, may I have an extension? It's taking a little bit more time to gather that information. Do not leave lawmakers hanging, okay? That's the one thing you do not want to do because they're pressed for time, and that could potentially affect the movement of your legislation. So you want to be prepared as much as possible. The other thing you want to do is ask them, how do they get their information? Is it in newspaper? Do they get it off of social media? Are there particular groups that they follow in CSL? Do they follow ALEC? You need to find out how do they get their information and in what format. And then also ask them, how would they like for you to send information? Do they want you to email them directly or send it to their staffer? Um, One of the best ways I can find out that I've created a great relationship with a lawmaker, I would ask for their cell phone number. And if I got it, then I knew that I became a trusted resource. And then I would ask, do you mind if I text you? And if they say yes, then I know I've became a trusted resource for them. And so that's something to always follow through and ask as well. And then ask them to meet with their constituents. Again, if people can't make it to the State House, find out this weekend while you're home back in the district, can we set up a coffee meeting with some of the advocates? Is there a community event that's going on this weekend where if you're doing SNAP, again, if you're doing a SNAP incentives campaign, maybe there's a local farmers market. You can have advocates there to meet the lawmaker and to take pictures. Always ask, for meetings with constituents. It is so vitally important. We cannot say this enough for lawmakers to hear from their constituents. And I would say 5 or more is the number you should really strive for. Next slide. Also, when you want to schedule a meeting, just call the office. Um, Remember, they get thousands of emails. I find that calling the office is better. Talking with the legislative staffer, they could get you in quicker than if you send an email. And again, always identify yourself, your address. And if it's a constituent, what I would do is, even though I worked for the American Heart Association, great brand name, if I'm meeting with a local lawmaker, I would have the constituent call, set up the meeting, and then they will say, not only will I be there, but I'm bringing someone from the American Heart Association. You can ask to meet with them in their state house or at the in their district. Again, a coffee meeting, or invite them to your organizational meeting where they can meet volunteers and board members and staff. Lawmakers again want to get out; they want to be seen. So make that happen for them. Next slide. Again, can't say enough about the staff. They're the best gatekeepers. And one of the things when we go back to special events, I got away from, again, doing lunches, but I would send a bagel tray to staffers in each of the caucuses because I know how hard they work. The receptionist, the doorman, the maintenance men, the mail people. You want to you want to have a good relationship with all of these people in the state house. So when I first started lobbying at the American Heart Association, we had a contract lobbyist. And my first day, he said, I'm going to take you down to the state house and introduce you to some important people. So I had my suit on, had my briefcase, had our legislative agenda and other documents, and I was raring to go. So I met him at the State House, and he introduced me to the gentleman that was over the mailroom. And I was like, okay, this is great to meet him. And then he introduced me to the director of the maintenance staff. I also met the doorman because each of our doors at the Indiana State House, you have to go through for the chambers a doorman. I met the administrative assistants, and I met like the lady that's over the state house tours and things of that nature. So right after our morning there, we went to lunch. And I told our contract lobbyist, I said, maybe it's me, but did you not introduce me to any lawmakers? He said, no, I introduced you to the important people. And that became, I understood that message after the first 2 weeks lobbying. When you have a great relationship with staff and people in the state house, they will help you to build relationship with lawmakers. And they also have intel that can be vitally important as you move your legislation. The mailman, even after he made the mail run, if I had packets of information that I needed delivered, he would still deliver them. And you know what I did? I always sent them every session. I bought lunch for the mailman, for the maintenance staff, for people in that position because they helped me to get my job done in the state house. So always remember, staff are important gatekeepers. Next slide. The other thing we want our constituents to do is we want them to express to lawmakers how they care about the issue, how it's impacting them, how it will be good for the community, how many people it will impact. You want your constituents to convey that. The more they could tell the story and paint the picture, the more connected the lawmaker will feel to the issue. Remember, lawmakers do not know everything. They are relying on experts and their constituents to help them to make the best decisions possible. And I know in this day and age, sometimes it comes down to a caucus vote. But when you can help create that synergy for lawmakers, then that's something they will keep in the back of their head. When we have great relationships with lawmakers, when they're in a caucus meeting, they will text you questions. Hey, this came up in discussion. This is what they're talking about. Can you give me some information really quick? And that's why cell phone numbers were vitally important, because if I had that good relationship and they're talking behind closed doors on what issues that they're going to support, I could easily text them the answer to try to help them to advocate for my issues behind that closed doors. So you want advocates to invite lawmakers to district meetings. You want them, again, to invite them into their space, their organizational space in front of boards, to events. And I'm not saying give lawmakers tickets or anything, but if there's a community event that you're hosting or having some type of town hall meeting, invite lawmakers. Again, you want to create that relationship with them, okay? Next slide. When you prepare packets of information, remember, these packets do not give them a huge report. You need fact sheets, one pagers. Lawmakers are getting information from hundreds of people and thousands of emails. So if you hand them a huge report, they're not going to read it. But if you can make the information as succinct as possible, that's great. And that should be part of your packet. You should have bios. You should have for your constituents, you need to have bios. You need to have information. Make it as succinct as possible. And again, that's the lawmakers meeting. And then we'll go tomorrow to wrap things up for us.
Thanks, Danny. I know we have so much information we've shared with you guys today. We're going to drop some more resources in the chat for you. And first of all, I just want to say thank you, Danny, for being with me here today. I don't know about all of you, but next time I have to go lobby or advocate, I want Danny on my team with me at the State House for sure. Thank you for all those stories and insights, Danny. Your expertise is invaluable. Like I said, we'll drop those additional links in the chat for you all. There's also going to be a post-event survey coming out to you by email, and we will send out the slides as well as the recording of this presentation. And I just want to wrap up by reminding everybody that you really are making change through the work that you're doing. This work does take time, you can see, but all of that hard work really does pay off. Even if your bill doesn't pass, you're still laying the groundwork for future work. Learning how to develop those key pathways of influence to lawmakers, building those valuable supports and relationships, and keeping the issue alive and relevant and continuing to educate lawmakers for the future is really important. The work does take time, but you're really learning a lot along the way, and you really are making a change through everything that you're doing. So please feel free. I apologize that we're just about out of time today, but if you have questions, reach out to our team. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We hope you gained some valuable insights and information, and hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season. Thank